This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to give legal or financial advice. Please consult with a competent professional regarding those topics and issues. Now, on with the show. Workplace violence, domestic terrorism, mass shootings. It's a reality, and it affects us all. Too often in these situations, employees aren't prepared to react. They become reliant on someone else rushing in and saving the day in the nick of time. It just doesn't work that way. You save more lives by being prepared, having the right training. I am Dan Skoczylas. After 24 years in law enforcement as a sergeant, detective, lieutenant, and working with a federal task force, I've seen it all. I use my experience and training to help you prepare your employees for potentially dangerous threats in your workplace. Be prepared, take action, and send the message. If you're looking for a victim, keep looking. Good day, all. This is Dan Skoczylas with CLS Enterprises Hawkeye Active Shooter Response. Welcome to our first of many podcasts. This is June 4th, 2020, and I wanted to talk about some of the things that we are all experiencing right at the moment, something outside the COVID-19 catastrophe that we've been dealing with. We do a lot of things here. We train people for active shooter response. We train companies and their employees for active shooter response. We do pre-employment background investigations. We examine policy, practice, and procedures, and consult with companies with regard to their security needs and what they can do to make their employees safer. However, one of the most important things that we try to convey whenever we're doing these training sessions is that each individual is responsible for themselves. And if anything could possibly make that point more or drive that point home, it would be the riots that we've been experiencing across the United States in the last week, and watching the police response or lack thereof to it. So I wanted to discuss that a little bit today. And I'm not going to, in any way, shape, or form, try to make this a political conversation or make it about Second Amendment rights or the Constitution or any of those things. I really want to talk just about the realities of things, okay? Some of the politicians that we have elected and put into place have turned the upper level command of our police agencies into puppets. And I'm watching these people talk on the news and watching some of the statements that they're making and some of the advice that they're giving, and I'm appalled. I was in law enforcement for 24 years. I left the business in 2014. I retired as a lieutenant. I have held multiple positions in that industry and had a very blessed career during those times. I'm very proud of the time that I spent doing that and very proud of my brothers and sisters in blue. That does not mean in any way, shape, or form that I support everything that they do. Just like in every other vocation in the world, there are good and there are bad. And what we saw with the recent incident in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I have no explanation for it, and I'm not going to try to defend it, and I'm not going to try to argue it. But from a tactical approach or a police procedural approach, what that officer did to that particular individual, which sparked this mess, was wrong. So let's get that out of the way and get on to the topic of the day, which is what happened in the aftermath. We have to let the system play out, okay? As tough as that may be sometimes, to jump to wanting immediate gratification in these cases and the tar and feather and hang 'em high approach just doesn't work. We have a system of laws in this country, and they need to be followed. And that's for everyone's benefit. Okay, we don't want a duly convicted individual to be released from custody because the investigation was rushed or the prosecution was done improperly. Okay, so we've got to let those things play out, and it's hard sometimes to be patient and to wait. The wheels of justice, as we know, turn very slowly, especially when you are waiting for the results to come forth. In the meantime, though, the reaction of some of the people with these, initially they started calling them protests, and I'm all for First Amendment rights and being able to vocalize and voice your displeasure with the way things have gone. But the minute you transpose from telling me how you feel to breaking property, to burning buildings, to looting, those are criminal acts. It's not protesting, it's criminal, period. And the minute those things start to occur, you too, if you are participating in them, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Those people whose property you are breaking, they're the people whose property you are stealing, the things that you are setting on fire belong to someone. In some cases where it's municipal property, it belongs to you. You're burning your own stuff. Taxpayer money has got to come into play to replace those things. But the point that I wanted to discuss really today, without getting into, whose fault this is, and because there's plenty of blame to go around, is the victims' reactions to these things. It's never become more apparent to me than watching these things on TV, that people, intended victims, tend to be sheep, just like they've been described many times. They're sheep, right? They expect that somebody else is going to swoop in, namely the police, and save them. Yet the politicians that we've all elected are telling the police, we're going to stand down and we're going to let these people vent. They just want to vent. They want their voices to be heard. Let your voice be heard. Just don't set my car on fire. I'll listen to you all day long. Just don't break out my store windows. Okay, I would love to hear your feelings and help you work through them and help come up with viable solutions, but not if you're running out of my storefront carrying all of my inventory. And when the police are told, don't do your job, we want these people to vent. When you've got law enforcement in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that is ordered by their mayor and their chief to abandon their station house and let those people burn it to the ground, the symbolism that is presented over the TV, over the airwaves to the American people over an incident like that is horrific. It is my opinion that we would not have the issues that we had that followed if they had not given up that police station and let them burn it down. Here's the deal. Nobody's going to save you. Nobody's going to get there in time to save you, right? When these politicians tell you that they've got the solutions, they've got the answers, don't defend yourself. Don't put yourself out there to do that. Don't defend your property and your family. You call 911 and wait for help to come. It's never going to get there in time. Truth of the matter is, if you call 911, you might as well leave the line open so they can find your body when they do get there. Ultimately, it's up to you to defend yourself. When you look at these things over the nationwide, the incidents where the people cowered to these individuals, they ran amok. But if you look at states like Iowa or some of the down southern states where people stood their ground and stood in front of their storefronts armed with baseball bats and long guns, there's no broken glass there. There's nobody looting there. Look, most of these people that are committing these criminal acts are truly cowards. If they are confronted with someone who's actually going to push back, who's not concerned about what the politicians are telling them, who's not concerned about being politically correct and how they appear on television. They're simply concerned with saving their livelihood and their families. It's just that simple. They've worked all their lives for this. They're not going to bow down to you and let you break out the windows. When confronted with that, these cowards jump like rats from the Titanic. Bottom line is this. If somebody comes to my front door and kicks in the door, comes in and shoots and kills me, there's two people, two entities to blame for that. Possibly three, but the police is not one of them. First off is the bad guy. He or she chose to be a bad guy. They're to blame for it. I don't want to hear about what your childhood was like and how you were raised. If you're a 30-year-old man and you kick in my door, you know that that's not right. We learn the difference between right and wrong very, very early on in life. Generally speaking, everybody knows that booting in somebody's front door, breaking out their glass windows, and stealing from them is not right. It's illegal, it's immoral, it's not right. But if you kick in my front door and come in and shoot me, in the immediate, there are two people to blame, the bad guy and me. Me for not recognizing my vulnerability. Me for not preparing myself to defend myself and my family. Me, I'm to blame. This country, for whatever reason, has got a phenomenal knack for pointing the finger in every other direction. Everybody who is currently incarcerated and doing hard time for crimes that they committed, I'm sure if you sat down with them, could lay out their life and tell you exactly who's to blame for why they're there. Amazingly enough, they would be last on the list. My father did this, my mother was that, I didn't have a proper home life, but you're the one sitting in jail. Your mother may be partially to blame for it, so may your father, but they're not locked up. You're sitting there, you're paying the price for this. It's your fault. You change it. The last thing that crosses my mind, if somebody boots in my front door, is to call 911. They are never going to get there in time. I responded to those calls. I know how that process works. If your life, if your property, if your livelihood is in immediate danger, there is only one person that can save you from that, and that is you, period. Especially during times like this, where the police, all well-intended in most cases, couldn't get there in time and save you if they wanted to. They're stretched so thin. They are pulled in so many different directions. And they know that they are damned if they do and they are damned if they don't. They are going to be criticized by the politicians. They are going to be criticized by the media. They are going to be second-guessed and criticized by the citizens that they're trying to serve. We are firsthand, and this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a number of years. We are firsthand seeing the dismantling of policing in the United States. We've got people crying and screaming for the police agencies to be defunded. They've got their own ideas. They're going to set up their own organizational security for their neighborhoods. Do you really want completely untrained individuals marching through the streets armed with long guns? Is that what you want? We saw firsthand what happens if the police go away. When you look at Minneapolis, Minnesota, that police agency abandoned its post, abandoned its citizens, abandoned its city, abandoned its own house, sacrificed it all, gave it all up, and walked away. I sat with my mouth agape. I still can't wrap my head around how and why any police department, any law enforcement entity would do that. Look, when those men and women took that oath to serve and protect, it meant something to them. It really means something to them. It's a lifestyle that you choose. It is a life that you choose. You understand that you are willing to give up your life to save the life of somebody that you don't know and have never met. And just like every other profession in the world, there are good cops and there are bad cops, but the vast majority are really, really good people trying to do really, really good things. But there's not enough of them. And they're not going to get there in time to save you. Ask those people in Minnesota, ask those people in Minneapolis, those shop owners whose lives are completely destroyed, what it's like to have a policeless society, what it's like to be left to fend for yourself. And then recognize that the way that this pendulum has swung at this point, it's going to be a long time before it comes back the other way. So you are going to have to save yourself. A lot of that comes from situational awareness, being prepared. I really don't think after what we've experienced over the course of the last week, anybody could possibly think to themselves any longer, it's just not going to happen here. Those things don't happen here. They happen everywhere. I live in Illinois, but far enough removed from the city of Chicago where, generally speaking, the carnage that occurs there does not affect me unless I seek it out, and I'm not seeking it out. Those days are done. Yet it came our way miles from my house, just miles from where I live. Looting, stores that I have shopped at, stores that my family has gone to, broken windows, things stolen. Friends that own those businesses alerted in the middle of the night by their cell phones going off when the cameras pick up movement in their place of business, only to arrive 20 minutes later and find people running out the front windows carrying his merchandise. And when he confronted them, they spit on him. They spit in his face. All he wanted them to do was go away. The police were never going to get there in time to do any good. At this point in time, you should view law enforcement for what it is, a report writing mechanism. It's what it's become. It's not what it's intended to be. It's not what they want it to be, but it's what it's become. Because if you have human contact, you risk being second-guessed and disciplined. In some cases, arrested. And in some cases, that's warranted, but those are the minorities. Those cases are the minority of what the job as a whole. I'm not talking about minority people. I'm talking about it's not as frequent as the media would like you to believe it is. But the impact is there and the damage is already done. I never once, during 24 years of law enforcement, ever arrested anybody because of their race or their gender or their religion or what they believed in. In most cases, I never knew what their beliefs were. I arrested criminals. I arrested people for committing criminal act. Regardless of their race, they were all treated the same. Those days are gone, however. In some states with bail reform, officers are arresting people. They're back out on the street committing the same acts within hours of the initial arrest, picking new victims who will ultimately dial 911 and say, this is going on. Somebody please come and help me. It's a shame that we are where we are. It really is. I don't have an answer or a solution of how we're going to get back to where we need to be. I don't have a solution for racial inequality. I don't know what that is. I'm not running for political office. I'm here to tell you that today, in this day and age, you have to protect you. Don't allow yourself to be a victim. You're going to have to find courage that you never thought you had you are going to have to find super abilities that you never thought you had. They're there. You just got to dig deep for them. You're protecting your life, your livelihood, and your family. Remember that. The small business owners, the ones that you see on TV sweeping the glass up off the sidewalk, crying because everything that they've worked for, everything that they've had has been taken from them in a minute, from seemingly the same people that patronized their stores weeks before. People that they would see coming in. These protests have been hijacked by terrorist organizations, by domestic terrorist organizations. They've got their influence and their input, and it's set something as wonderful as a legitimate peaceful protest to express your displeasure and your First Amendment rights. It's turned it into a criminal, chaotic riot, and it's ruined lives. And until we stand up as individuals, as a nation, and say, this is not going to work. If my elected politicians and the police department that I pay taxes for to protect this are not going to do this, then I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it myself. I need to survive this. You can always elect new politicians, and they need to appoint people to these agency heads that are qualified to be there. Not their political puppets, but qualified to be there. Look, no mayor should be directing the police department. The mayor should be appointing a police chief that is competent based on experience and education and a track record to lead that agency, and let him or her lead it. I've seen mayors from these towns that were under attack completely fold like a deck of cards. It just comes tumbling down around them. And yet they're still telling their police chiefs what to do. And then you see the commanding staff on TV saying, we're doing a wonderful job. You're not. You can't stand there on camera telling me that your officers are doing a wonderful job as the city in the background burns behind you. We deserve better than this. And if you can't provide it, then the citizens will provide it for themselves. It's just that simple. So I speak to my fellow law enforcement officers here a little bit too. Your jobs, your vocation is at risk. I said it for a couple of years before I left policing. Said people are starting to recognize that the police are doing less and less and less for them. And ultimately, if we don't get a handle on this and figure out how to better serve them, they will come to the realization that they don't need us. They don't need them. You're not doing anything for me anyway. What am I paying for? Yet, the minute you remove police from the streets, you end up with Minneapolis. It wasn't a long period of time. It happened overnight. That thin blue line has to exist. It has to be there, or we're going to end up with the chaos that you've seen over the course of the last week in so many huge municipalities, in so many large cities. I've got a daughter that goes to school in New York. I don't know if she's ever going to be going back there. The school, the area that she loved so much, the city that she loved so much, is in complete shambles. So many law enforcement officers standing off to the side doing nothing at all because that's what they were directed to do. Nothing. Let them vent, they said. Let them express their anger. You can express your anger all day. When you break windows, it's a criminal act. You should be going to jail for that, and you should be staying in jail. You should get your due process, but you should be locked up. I feel bad for the protesters. I do not feel bad for the rioters. I feel horrible for the small business owners. They're going to have such a difficult time recovering from this. And for those of you that were out there taking part in these things, the lives that you ruined far outweigh those that you helped. If we all took care of our own home, if we all took care of what was contained within our four walls, most of these issues would go away. If everybody took responsibility for what they did, for what they said, instead of trying to point the finger someplace else and say, this is why I'm this way. This is why I did this. Personal responsibility. I pray that this gets better. In future podcasts, we're going to get a little bit more on track and talk about violence in the workplace and measures that we can use to prevent and mitigate those things. But again, you're going to find that it all comes down to the same thing, personal responsibility, understanding what you're responsible for and making sure that you take care of business there. We're going to have some guests on the show over the course of the next few months. Some people that have been involved in active shooter events, both law enforcement and employees and victims of workplace violence. We're going to get them on here too, so you can hear their stories. I'm going to try to get some business owners that have been impacted by this rioting and get them on here to give us their story. It's very important that you take responsibility for yourself and what God has entrusted you with. Okay. I wrote a book on this last year called If You're Looking for a Victim, Keep Looking. The title was picked out to kind of say it all. And I think it's very applicable here. You know, I call 911 simply to get somebody to take the report. Because if I'm counting on that phone call getting you there in time to save me, it's just not going to happen. I'm going to be another victim. I'm going to be at the mercy of the offender. I'm going to be a sheep. And I refuse to be a sheep. There are people that are counting on you to be around. There are people that are counting on you to do things for them, namely your family. If you're a business owner, then the people in that community that you serve count on you to be there. You owe it to them, if not yourself, to make sure that you are not a victim. I pray for everybody out there. I pray for a quick end to this. I pray for our politicians. I pray for a solution to the racial issues that caused this event. But most of all, I pray for you to recognize that actions that you take are the things that make the difference in your life, not somebody else. Step up and take care of your house and your business. Step up and take care of your family. Thanks for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. Looking forward to the next podcast, and hope that you will jump on board for that as well. If you need to contact us, you can find us on the web at hawkeyeprepared.com. Send us an email. You can get a hold of us by phone. The phone number is there as well. Be happy to talk to you, answer questions about this. We're here to help. And frankly, at this point, here just if you need to vent. We would love to hear your story. We would love to hear stories about people that stepped up and stood their ground and backed these people off, backed the rioters off, and saved their business and saved the windows in the front of their business, and how you did it and what drove you to do that. So feel free to reach out. I'm out. See you soon.